All right, happy to have on Rob Dauster. Field of 68 covers it nationally. Rob, looking forward to diving into this FAU Illinois matchup, but you got to see this FAU team up close and personal for a couple of days. Like, what stands out about this Final Four team that basically has everybody back?
I mean, they're not a mid-major. They might play in the American Athletic Conference, but they're certainly not a mid-major. They got a couple guys that are going to be pros, going to make a lot of money playing basketball in the wings, and Elijah Martin and Janelle Davis. They got a big guy in Vlad Golden that is 7'1" and a monster. You can't stop him one-on-one in the post. They have the size and athleticism that you would expect out of any high major basketball program. Like we were down at the Field of 68 tip-off in Boca Raton over the weekend, and we got to see Charleston up close and personal, and we got to see Liberty up close and personal, and we got to see FAU up close and personal. And the one thing that stood out more than anything else about FAU was they got dudes everywhere. They got size, they got athleticism, they got physicality. Those guys don't look like mid-major basketball players at all. They look like grown-ass men.
So how have they been able to do this, Rob, to keep everybody in this day and age, to not lose your coach in Dusty? How have they built this thing and kept it?
Well, I think part of it is that that Dusty ended up coming back, right? Like there were some jobs that opened up. There was nothing that was obvious. When he was able to keep Janelle Davis and Elijah Martin from entering the transfer portal, I think that it kind of made his decision to come back a little bit easier, right? Like if you lose your two best players and you have to come back to FAU, which is not historically a great job, it makes it a little easier for you to try to make a push. And, maybe he can go try to get Ole Miss before they hire Chris Beard. Maybe he can go try to get something like a Penn State before they hire Mike Rhodes. So it's not the ideal job for him. But once you get back your two All-American candidates, once you know that you're basically returning 8 of the 9 guys that you had on your roster, that makes it a lot easier to come back. And in turn, once you know you're getting your coach back and your two best players have already said they're planning on coming back, then everybody else is like, okay, I want to be in on this as well. But I think it also speaks to the culture that they have developed. I know that's a buzzword in college basketball these days, but last year, FAU's 3 leading scorers all came off the bench for the majority of the season, right? You look at it this year, and there's no egos on that roster. There's nobody that is like sitting here saying, like, Vlad Golden's not upset if he misses a shot because it might move him down draft boards. We were there on Thursday night. Janelle Davis didn't have a field goal. He finished with 2 points. He missed a layup, got an offensive rebound, had a chance to go back up. It's the kind of thing most guys, if they have a chance to go pro, if they are on draft boards, might force it up, might try to get some extra points, might try to pad their stats when they're up by 30. But nah, he's getting that offensive rebound. He kicked it out to a dude for a 3 when they were already up by 25. It's just there's a level of community on that roster, of team building on that roster, of culture on that roster that you don't find in a lot of places. And it's they are a fun team to watch. They are an easy team to root for, but I guarantee you that Brad Underwood has spent the last couple of days sitting there losing a little bit of sleep about figuring out how the hell he's going to deal with these guys.
Yeah, so I want to ask you about this matchup, but after that weird loss to Bryant, they beat Butler, Texas A&M, Virginia Tech, Liberty, Charleston. These are all good teams. They beat Loyola Chicago earlier in the year as well. For people that haven't seen them play, for the Illini fans that haven't seen them play, what is their style like? How do they attack teams?
Well, they're tough, they're physical, they're aggressive, they're going to get after you defensively, but I think where they're really a threat is on the offensive end of the floor because they kind of play 4-around-1. Like they got a big guy in Vlad Golden who is 7'1". You can throw the ball into him, he can score over either shoulder, he can pass out of double teams, and they have 3 or 4 playmakers around him at all times that can take advantage of the fact that you have to make a decision on whether or not you're going to double team him. So they kind of play inside out, which is weird to think about when their 2 best players are both on the wing. Janelle Davis is more of the kind of like penetrator, slasher, more of a natural scorer, where Elijah Martin is the more athletic of the two, but he's more of a shooter than he is necessarily a guy that you're going to put on the island and let him kind of go one-on-one. He's good when he can catch it, pump fake, and kind of get to his right hand. But that's kind of what they are. Defensively, they're going to get after you. They're at their best when Golden's on the floor because they want to get out. They want to pressure a little bit. They want to try to make you uncomfortable defensively. And the way that they do that is by getting out and kind of overplaying on the perimeter a little bit. And that works a lot better when you got a 7'1" shot blocker back there that can really be a difference maker. But the problem with them And the problem with preparing for them is they're just so balanced. Like they have a lot of guys that make a lot of good decisions, and you can kind of throw around all the buzzwords about them. But we can, like I just said, that you want to throw the ball into him and have this guy beat you. Well, he was not very good in the first half against Charleston, and they had the kid Giancarlo Rosado come in and had like 13-9 in the first half. So they're deep, they're balanced. They got kids that are willing to take sacrifices. They got kids that are willing to give the ball to the hot hand. It's everything that you want to see out of a basketball team, and they just so happen to have like 2 or 3 dudes that are going to end up playing pro basketball on it. They're legit. It's wild. They're one of the more unbelievable stories in college basketball, but it's been a lot of fun to watch them.
Yeah. Well, Illinois, I got plenty of questions about their offense, Rob, going in against opponents like this, and Tennessee this week with the lack of a true point guard, kind of the talk of it around here at Illinois. But defensively, I think Illinois is legit. I think their size, their physicality. So what do you make about that going up against Florida Atlantic? Like, what do we probably learn a lot about Florida Atlantic's offense, I would imagine, going against Illinois' defense?
Yeah, I think so. I'm not, to be honest, like I'm not worried about that for FAU. I mean, they made it to the Final Four, right? They've played on big stages. They were, if Lamont Butler doesn't hit that shot at the buzzer, they are playing Yukon for a national title, right? So they've been on the stage. They've dealt with teams that are good defensively. They've dealt with teams that are good offensively. There's nothing that you're going to do that can surprise them. That said, I think that the matchup here is something where you should feel good about it if you're an Illinois fan, because they're not going to get bullied, right? And that's the one thing that FAU can kind of do to some of these other teams, and they even did it a little bit to like a Texas A&M and a Virginia Tech, where they could kind of they don't have to do it, but they can kind of out athlete you, right? And that's not going to happen against Illinois. Illinois has got, I mean, their starting lineup is basically like a bunch of guys that are 6'7" and Dane Danger, more or less. So they have the size, the length, the athleticism. To me, the key is going to end up being kind of like, what does Coleman Hawkins do against Vlad Golden? Can they go to this smaller lineup? Is he going to be good enough on the defensive end where you don't have to put Danger on the floor? Because I think the advantage of being able, like, that's what makes Coleman so good, right? Like, he is, unless you're going up against one of the elite bigs in America, he makes it impossible for you to deal with him, because, you could basically play him as a point center if you need to at times, right? And I don't know if that would necessarily work against a dude like Vlad Golden. I'm also going to be very curious to see what Janelle Davis and Elijah Martin do against some of these 6'6" athletes that Illinois has. And I promise you, there's a lot of NBA scouts that are going to be looking for that same thing when they watch this game as well. But yeah, to me, it kind of comes down to that matchup at the 5 spot and whether or not Hawkins is going to be enough defensively to allow them to play that small ball 5-out style.
This is a weird question. Is Terrence Shannon the best player on the court tomorrow night?
If he is, I think Illinois will win. Right? Like, I think that him, Nelly Davis, Elijah Martin, like, they're all very, very good. And it's kind of like, everybody, some people love vanilla ice cream, some people love mint chocolate chip ice cream, some people want to eat pistachio ice cream. It's like whatever your favorite flavor is there. But if he is the best player on the floor, then Illinois is going to win this game.
You've heard us talk about home field apparel since the start of the season. There are a lot of collegiate apparel brands out there, but we wanted to partner with Home Field because their designs are the best out there. Some of Illini Inquirer's favorites are the basketball ringer tee, the rose tee, and the 1980s long sleeve with the script Illini. It's great. Be sure to check out homefieldapparel.com, filter by Illinois, and see what we're talking about. And our listeners get an exclusive deal using code Illini23. Using that code Illini23 gets you 15% off your first order. We all know you're wearing Illini gear, so if you're in need of a refresh, we really think that you should check out Home Field Apparel, which has the best designs, and these shirts, guys, are really comfortable. Their designs are super unique, and a lot of thought goes into each concept. There's really nothing else on the market like what Home Field is doing. You can find them at homefieldapparel.com and use code Illini23 for 15% off your first order at homefieldapparel.com. What do you make of this Illinois team, Rob?
I mean, the early returns are pretty impressive, right? Like, you lose, the only game they've lost is Marquette, and everyone knows how good this Marquette team is. But at the same time, the only time Illinois has really been challenged so far was Marquette, and they lost that game at home. So I guess it kind of depends on what your take was of them heading into the season, because you can kind of make the argument either way. Like, yeah, you know what? Look at them. They're blowing out Rutgers. They're blowing out Western Illinois. They're doing what they're supposed to in some of these matchups. And the other side of it is like, yeah, but if you're really that good, then you shouldn't be losing at home to a Marquette team that has Tyler Kolek with a bad ankle. I think we're going to find out a lot about Illinois in these next 5 days, and how they do against FAU, who plays a very different style than a team like a Tennessee that wants to be physical and wants to kind of beat you up and is going to be built around what they do defensively. I think we learn a lot about Illinois this week. And if they go 2-0, then we're having a conversation about, you know what, maybe outplaying Purdue is possible. Maybe they are a team that can win a Big Ten championship. And if they get smoked twice this week, then it's like, well, you know, maybe you have to have a conversation about whether or not this is a team that can get out of the first weekend. Maybe they are going to be a team where they got to get work done in February in the Big Ten just to be able to make the tournament. So I don't think it's either of those things. I think they'll probably, like, if I had to bet on it, I think they'll probably split this week. But we will ask me that question in about 7 days, and I think I'll have a different answer than I do right now.
It's amazing given where the program was like 5-6 years ago, Rob, but like winning the Big Ten probably doesn't excite a lot of fans out there. It's just about getting the second weekend of the tournament. You've covered this for so long. You know, you lose a game like the Loyola one and it hangs over a program, especially when you don't get it, you know, far in the tournament in those upcoming years. Is there any key, do you think, for Brad Underwood to get to the second weekend, or is it just good draw, good game on those days?
I mean, it's all about the draw, right? And even if you have a great draw, think about it like this. FAU was able to make the Final Four. If things go differently in that first round game I don't know how many Illinois fans watched it, but it was basically like a jump ball at the end that gave the ball to FAU instead of giving the ball to Memphis when they could have given Memphis a timeout. And then FAU turns around and goes and scores a game-winning basket with the ball in their hands. It's that close to FAU losing in the first round of the NCAA tournament. If they lose in the first round of the NCAA tournament, you know, we're having a very different conversation about FAU heading into this season. Maybe Dusty May isn't coming back. Yeah. Maybe those 2 weeks, that experience they had for 2 weeks doesn't convince Janelle Davis and Elijah Martin to come back to school. And it's amazing how many narratives can get changed because of one thing that happened in one game in March. And it's college basketball, man. If you can't get excited about competing for a Big Ten title, if you can't get excited about the chance to, you know, maybe go out and knock off a Purdue and win the league, if you can't sit here and say, look, we have enough talent to win the Big Ten tournament and get excited about it, like what are you a college basketball fan for? Is it just for one run in March? That seems silly to me.
Yeah, I think conference titles matter. I think conference record kind of tells you what you are as a program, but I get it. They're just itching for that long run. Your Yukon Huskies take on UNC in the nightcap Tuesday at Madison Square Garden. Big time matchup, Rob. What do you think of it?
I think we're going to see a bounce back from Yukon here. I think that what Kansas was able to do defensively is something that is not going to be replicable by North Carolina. The long and short of it is Kansas switched everything 1 through 4, took Yukon out of what they wanted to do offensively, and UKon's built to be able to get points out of their offensive sets as opposed to getting points out of one-on-one basketball. And I don't think North Carolina has the dudes to be able to switch 1 through 4. And I think UKon will win this game by 10 or 12 points. I think this is a very, very good matchup for UKon.
I want to get your unvarnished thoughts, Rob, on the Big Ten. Go.
I think it's more evenly distributed than maybe people were going to give it credit for. I think that when you see something like what happened on Friday night in Evanston, Boo Buie, 31 points, 9 assists, no turnovers, beat Purdue. That kind of tells you what you need to know about the conference as a whole. That said, the fact that Michigan State is struggling is not necessarily a great thing for the league, right? Like, I think we all kind of expected them to be an actual national title contender. And if Michigan State isn't a title contender, like, is it just Purdue? Can Illinois get in that mix? Is Ohio State actually good? You know, what is going to happen with Wisconsin after what they just did against Marquette? You know, I know how good they looked in that win on Saturday. I know how good they looked down at Fort Myers when they beat up on Virginia. But I also watched that game when they lost to Providence by roughly 800 points. So how good are they actually? It's such a weird conference this year because what we thought we knew coming in I don't know, like maybe it's true, maybe it's not. Like maybe Purdue is great again, maybe they're actually beatable. I don't know. So uh I think the long and short of it is Purdue is probably still the favorite, right? And I don't think anyone would necessarily argue that. And once you get past Purdue, I think there's probably 7 teams that could be the second best team in that league. That might mean that they get 9 teams that are good enough to make a second weekend. That might mean Purdue is the only team good enough to make the second weekend. That might mean no one makes the second weekend. But to me, that's just kind of where you could say the exact same stuff about college basketball as a whole at this point. It's just with the advent of the COVID year, with these guys getting 5th and 6th seasons, with everybody able to get the one-time transfers to allow some of these players from lower levels to move up. You got older guys, 23 and 24-year-olds going up against some of these elite talented freshmen. It's leveled the playing field to a point where I think you can make the argument that college basketball, top to bottom, is as good and as balanced as it's quite literally ever been in the history of the sport.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, is this the most parity you've ever seen in college basketball? And is it the portal? Is it these extra years? Is that all it is?
Yes, it's all of it. It's all of it. And I do think that the top of the sport is very good, right? Like I think Purdue is a very good basketball team. I think Arizona is a very good basketball team. I think Yukon and Kansas and Marquette are very, very good basketball teams. But they're all just a little bit flawed. None of them are great. And it's one of those years where I feel like we have 11 teams that on a normal season would be like the number 5 team in the country, but there's nobody that in a normal year would be the number 1 team in the country. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. No, like you think of Illini fans, of course, remember 04, 05. Like there were 2 or 3 teams that were clearly above everybody else. Right now, it's just the Final Four we had last year. I know it's a one and done tournament, but it just feels like more teams actually have a chance to go that far. So. And in the Big Ten, I think you see, Rob, like it's a deep league, but the top it's Purdue, and is anybody else really a top team? It kind of feels like college basketball at large.
Yeah, there's probably, I would say there's 8 teams at the top of a sport that have kind of separated themselves. I would put Houston there. I'd put Purdue there. I'd put Arizona there. I'd put Yukon there. I would put Marquette there. I would put Kansas there. And I would probably, I'm close to putting FAU in that same conversation. And once you get past that, like how far away is Creighton really with what they can do offensively? I know they lost to Colorado State. That might say more about Colorado State. How far away is Baylor from that conversation? They don't have a big win yet, but they've looked damn good when we watched them. We've seen Gonzaga have impressive games so far this season. North Carolina's looked really good. North Carolina put up 100 points on Tennessee the other night.
Right.
Tennessee's the best defensive team in the sport over the last 3 years. Carolina put 100 on them. So there's just a lot of really good basketball being played in the sport. It's a good time to be a college basketball fan, and I'll tell you that.
Yeah, it's a good week for Illinois basketball fans. It's a fun week, FAU. What do you think of Tennessee, Illinois? I mean, that could be a football game.
Yeah. I'm not 100% sold on Tennessee. Rick Barnes is trying to add more offensive firepower, and I'm just not all the way bought in on this idea that he's going to stick with it if it also means losing games. Like, I just kind of feel like coaches are going to revert to what they know best. And I think what Rick Barnes knows best is trying to win games 55-50 by putting out a bunch of rugby players and saying they can't call a foul on every possession. So I don't know. I'll see what happens with Tennessee. But look, if Dalton Connect, if he's healthy, he did his ankle against North Carolina. When was that? Last Tuesday?
Yeah.
So we'll see how long that thing takes to kind of get back to where it's 100% right. But he can get 40 on any given night, but it's also one of those things where I don't necessarily trust Rick Barnes to kind of allow them to do that. I think Illinois, they should win that. They should win that game. Especially, it's at home, right? It's that one's in Champaign.
That's at Tennessee.
Oh, that's at Tennessee.
Yeah.
It'll be loud, I'll tell you that.
I'm looking forward to being there. Well, Rob Dauster, Field of 68. Speaking of, have fun at Madison Square Garden, man. It's a fun place to be, and it's going to be a fun night. Appreciate the insight, man.
Thanks for having me on.
This episode of the Illini Inquirer podcast is presented by Underdog Sports. We see a lot of you are downloading Underdog Sports, using the promo code, and having fun, which we love to see. If you haven't already checked out Underdog Sports, be sure to do so. It's super easy to use. You go on the app, go pick whether favorite players will have a higher or lower stat total than what is listed. For example, Travis Kelce He's very popular these days. If his number is set at 50 receiving yards and you know Taylor Swift is in the house, you may feel confident he's going to go way higher than the number. Do that with 2 to 5 different players and you're in business. If you go 5 for 5, you can 20x your money. So sign up today with promo code Illini and get your first deposit doubled up to $100. Visit UnderdogFantasy.com or find them in the App Store. And don't forget to register with promo code Illini to get your first deposit doubled up to $100. There are a lot of fantasy companies out there, but we decided to partner with Underdog because it's the easiest place to play fantasy sports. It's also the fastest growing fantasy app in the industry. You must be 18 or older and present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. Concerned with your play? Call 1-800-522-4700 or visit www.ncpgambling.org.